They have been sequestered in the dormitories, says the Sister Superior. It is cramped, but they are safe for the time being. My escorts take me to the building on the other side, 3 stories high and jutting from the inner face of the main wall. Smaller gun turrets dot the upper floor and roof. Inside is a wide chamber and more stairs. I am taken up the flight to the next floor, coming to a chapel room with an altar, lectern, and a bunch of paintings and small statuary. The rest of the Sister Superior squad stand ready, 5 along one wall, 2 on the other. My escorts fall into place with them, leaving me standing before Canoness Erasmia. With her is a short, slight man in a brown robe tied with a golden belt, his head tonsured with the symbol of the Adeptus Administrorum. A large metal-bound book under one arm, and a long-handled mace held in his other hand. He looks tired, eyes bloodshot and ringed, the skin hanging from his aging face. My prosecutors, no doubt. I swallow hard, realizing that this is it. There's no coming back from this. No last-minute escape. No sudden leap to freedom. I will be tried, judged, and sentenced to an excruciating death, and there is nothing, absolutely nothing, I can do to stop it. I consider falling my knees and begging. After all, if I admit my sins, does that not release my soul of its guilt? But really, I'm not the begging type. And for all that, maybe I have committed heresy. I still believe that the Emperor brought me back. And he doesn't do stuff like that on a whim. Cage, says the man, looking me up and down. A hint of a smile ghosts across his lips. I can see why they call you the Burned Man. I've had worse names, I say. Indeed. I am sure you have, young man, says the priest. I am sure you have. Quite a life you have lived. By every account I have heard. Not all of it wasted, I hope, I say with pride. I've done wrong, I admit that. But there's fewer enemies of the Emperor around because of me. Certainly. The priest steps closer, looking at me with strange fascination. It's unsettling me so I turn my attention to the canoness. She views me with all the delight of someone examining the shit they've just trodden in. It is remarkable, is it not? Says the priest, turning his head to look back at Erasmia. He certainly has been through the wars. You can't deny that. Many have fought on the battlefields of the Emperor, the canoness growls back. Some survive when millions of others die. That does not make them saints. Saint, I say, but neither of them is paying me any attention, obviously continuing a discussion begun before my arrival. This story of the Burned Man, the testimony of Colonel Schaefer, is unequivocal. The story recounted by Cage's followers and his exploits since the arrival of the infernal wound speak to the signs of sainthood. It is a disgrace that you should associate this, the canoness throws a dismissive gesture towards me, with the likes of Keeler, Sabbat, and Celestine. Ah, but you forget that not all saints come from your orders, canoness, the priest replies. Who are you? I ask, trying to get my head around the point of the conversation. Are you saying that you think I'm a saint? A living saint, perhaps, the priest says with an enthusiastic nod. My apologies, young man. I am preacher Dienamenialis, the sole remaining clergy of the Adeptus Ministrum facility. Most soldiers I've dealt with just call me the old preacher. And sainthood? I throw a glance at Erasmia, who flinches at the use of the term, biting back angry words. Well, I think there is cause for examination, certainly, says the old preacher. Such matters are not decided upon whim, and there would be serious debate. It is not for me to appoint you with such a such a title, obviously. Indeed, it is not, the canonist says with notable conviction. But you have fulfilled many of the criteria I assert. Some of it seems very obvious to me. For the first time, he shows some annoyance as he looks at the canonist. How can one ignore the symbolism of striking down a serpent? I do not know. So, I'm not a heretic? Erasmia's jaw tightens so hard, I think I can hear her teeth cracking. It is clerical judgment, and which I prefer to Denominalialis, she says with gritted teeth. Of course not, young man. Old preacher pats me on the arm. One that has been touched by the Emperor in this way cannot be tried for heresy. You may be the embodiment of his will, I believe. Perhaps a saint. Perhaps just the beneficiary of a miracle. Neither is heresy. Please tell me you ain't mentioned this to the colonel yet, I say. I really would like to be there when I'm cut off by sudden loud clanging of bells. Not real bells, of course, but simulated clamor from box splitters set on the roof of the chapel. The battle sisters are already moving, turning the doors, and I see the looks of concern on the faces of the preacher and canoness. They're not ringing out in celebration for me, are they? Damn it. Yeah, we got you a parasite out there. I have quite a broad experience of alarms of various kinds: shipboard sirens, air attack blasts, alert signals, and every kind of loudmouth officer shouting his fragging head off. I've heard them all. There's really nothing like a fake bell pealing constantly at deafening levels to get the heart racing and the body moving. The crash of the Battle Sisters' steps echoes around the bare corridors and chambers of the Battle Abbey, heralding the blaze of silver, red, and black as they flood the walls. At a rough count, I say there must be about 120 of them, plus whoever's manning the fixed guns. In the vehicle compound, engines growl to life, the smoke of their exhausts lifting to join the center smog above the abbey. The bell ringing ceases, replaced by a stern stream of Gothic I don't understand. It could be a prayer or orders. It's impossible to say. After a minute, this gives way to a rousing verse of song, a hymnal, glorifying the strength of the emperor, singing the praises of Saint Catherine. I find myself milling about the main cloister, not sure what to do. The colonel and about 2 dozen hivers and wasters emerge from the door opposite, some of them still covering their ears. As if summoned, Canoness Erasmia appears beside me, 3 other sisters in dark robes beside her. Return to your quarters at once, the canoness barks. Her fellow sisters head towards the building Schaefer and his company have left. Give us back our weapons, revered canoness, says the colonel. We can help. Denominalialis arrives next, a sister superior at his shoulder. Old preacher, old preacher, tell the canoness we should help defend the walls, I say. He looks surprised by the request. I could not possibly do such a thing, young man, he replies. Don't you want to live in Saint to defend your abbey? What? Barks the colonel, looking from me to the preacher and back again. I do not have the authority, Lieutenant Cage. Old preacher continues. I am sure you know full well that the decree passive forbids the ecclesiarchy from commanding men under arms. All military matters are the province of the sisterhood. It would be most improper of me to interfere. I redirect my attention to the sister superior at his side. I'm sure she's the one that brought me from the cell. Almost as certain that this is the squad leader that reported me to the canoness. Sister Eladia? Yes. It's obvious she wants to join her sisters in the defenses, glancing at the silvered warriors assembling above us. We can fight with you. Surely you want all the help you can get. The Emperor brought you to us when we needed you. Wouldn't it be wrong to ignore that gift? Even through the holy broadcast, I hear a mournful dirge that has become all too familiar, a ceaseless, monotonous chanting that doesn't arrive just to the ears, but is felt in the mind and resonates through the gut. I don't know whether it's my words that convince Eladia or the imminent threat, but she points to the gatehouse. When you have your weapons, hold the wall there. Do not get in the way of my sisters. She looks at Erasmia. Kindness, please release the prisoners' weapons to them. She puts a hand on old preacher's shoulder and guides him away, heading for the sanctuary of the inner abbey. When he is through the doorway, she moves past us, heading straight for the rampart. Wait here, Erasmia tells us, lifting a hand to a vox piece clipped to her ear. She whispers something briefly, not happy at all. Before our weapons arrive, the main cannons boom into life, spitting shells back into what had once been Imperial territory. Attacking from behind the line? The Warpborn do not need logistics and lines of supplies as mortal armies do, Schaefer says. If they can manifest, they will, without other restriction. Some of the Battle Sisters' heavy bolters open fire. The enemy are approaching fast, it seems, going from cannon range to heavy weapon range in less than 1 minute. I want to run up to the rampart to see, but Eladia's command holds me back. I can easily imagine being barged aside or even cut down if we interfere with the Battle Sister squads. A double door rumbles open behind us, and half a dozen young women emerge, pulling a couple of small carts laden with our weapons. 2 companies, hivers and wasters, I say as the group moves forward to reclaim our armaments. Orska, you know what to do? Shoot outside the wall? She says with a laugh. Not inside. Good enough, I say. You are no longer in command, the colonel snaps, putting a hand in my chest to stop me as I turn away with las pistol and knife. This is Imperial territory. The chain of command is in force. You are all troopers of the 13th Penal Legion, remember? I wave my knife towards the wasters and hivers, running towards the steps that lead to the gatehouse wall. They're not listening to you, Colonel, I say, pushing his arm aside with mine. I slip my knife into my belt and check the power cell of my pistol. Good for another 30 shots. You want to argue about it, or go kill some damn demons? He snarls all over the answer, and I push past, breaking into a run. Mounting the steps 2 at a time, I reach the rampart, but we're facing the wrong way to see anything. The attack is coming from the back of the abbey. The sisters at the far wall, about 60 meters away, fire constantly down at the enemies that I can't see. Cage! The voice that calls for me is shrill, almost breaking Look! I turn to see the open space before the gate, a mess of mud and ash cut through with track marks and boot prints. Oily puddles bubble to existence in the mire, becoming broader pools of dark, congealing liquid. I stop counting at 20, scattered around us, about 50 meters from the wall. The hairs of my arm are standing up, and my neck throbs. Warp spawn! I growl, catching the closest pool as it bends outwards, the erratic light of search lamps and cloud swathed dawn dancing across the bulging surface. The bubble splits, becoming two, three, four, five distinct blobs, falling away from rough figures within. Within the passing of a minute, nearly 100 plague carriers stand before us, larger tentacle-mouthed beasts dragging themselves into existence around them. An unnatural gust of wind wafts the stench of graveyards and deathbeds over us. But this time it seems to dissipate almost instantly, replaced by the smell of the sisters' incense. The demon's monotonous chanting and toiling of discordant bells is lost against the rousing hymnals of Vox Mitters, praises to the God Emperor, to drown out the slobbering and wails of charging beasts. It's disgusting to look at the congealing warpborn, but I don't feel the gut-churning revulsion that affected me in the wastes. We open fire as the rotting warriors advance, a surge in the song from the Voxmitters, drowning out the madness-inducing chant that accompanies them. Las bolts and bullets scythe down, greeting the striding plague warriors and slug beasts with a haphazard wail of fire. Las blasts slash across the unnatural flesh, leaving smoking welts, but little else. While bullets seem to slow as they hit, as if they've been fired into wet ground, and with equal effect. A sudden roar of bolters engulfs us from the towers either side. Three distinct volleys of bolts shear through the oncoming warpborn, their detonations shearing off limbs, rupturing inhuman bodies, and blowing apart warpborn skulls. The slain demons return to piles of slurry, seeping back into the trampled ground. Keep firing, I warn, noticing the sloshing remains continuing to move, slithering across the ground, slowly reforming. Like rivulets down a hill, they come together, creating a larger pool about 30 meters from the outer towers. Gunfire from the barbican lashes into the morass, but there's nothing physical to shoot, so bolts and gouts of flame simply disappear into the rippling surface. As before, the warp stuff bulges and writhes, gathering shape from nothing. Its surface is pocked by bolt impacts, vapors rising from blistering edges as multi-meltas and burning promethium scour the surface of the bubbling mass. This time, there is no splitting. The creature that heaves its immense bulk from the ground is as big as the winged nightmare that came upon us in the underhive. This is not blood and shadow, though, but a heaving pile of festering flesh and pus-slicked horror. It continues to swell, almost as tall as the towers and far greater in bulk. A rusted mace forms out of a growing limb, at its end pierced like a censer, trailing swarms of black flies like living smog. The broken nailed fingers of the other hand grip the hilt of an immense rusted sword, longer than I am tall, and as broad as a man's shoulders. Folds of green skin and rolls of flesh materialize from the mucus froth, growing in a broad, reckless head, with a cluster of beady eyes over a slit mouth that grins in a terrifying fashion as it turns its immortal attention upon us. Shrieks of pure dread rebound from the walls around me, and I hear voices raised to the God Emperor, pleading, sobbing for protection. A slobbering tongue lolls from the mouth to leave a trail of hissing saliva over multiple chins. I can feel waves of nausea beating at my thoughts, like a hot wind, and remember the crazed souls in the dungeon. If not for the sanctuary of the Abbey, perhaps we would all lose our minds to the corruptive force of the Warpborn. As more gunfire rakes into the uncaring demon flesh, the monstrous creature swings its mace, the head crashing against the reinforced ferrocrete wall with thunderclap detonation. Shards of masonry spray from the gouge carved in the corner of the tower. Cracks race outward, the material succumbing to centuries of decay in seconds as the power of the warp fiend spreads further and further. Shrugging off blasts that would have pierced the armor of battle tanks, the towering nightmare brings down its blade, carving a ruin through already weakened stone, shattering the wall from its foundations. Silver armored bodies topple from the breaking tower, a dozen of them, crushed in the devastation of their fort. Like a mote of dust in a sandstorm, I feel utterly helpless against the titanic power formed in front of us. Never before have I felt more like a small and pointless assembly of bones, flesh, and blood. The fear is so overwhelming that it's become nonsensical, a total numbing of the senses to everything around me. For several heartbeats, there's just me and the uncaring vastness of the universe. I hear laughing, a guttural explosion that shakes the walls, summing up the utter disdain that the universe has for me. I raise my las pistol and feel so absurd that I might start laughing too. An ant might as well try to destroy a Lehman Russ tank. Sweating, feeling fever heat coursing through me, I almost lose my grip on my pistol as my hand starts to shake, my muscles twitching with some kind of palsy of dread. A flash of red startles me from my fugue. Across the gatehouse, I see the colonel firing at the immense creature, ripping off shots with the las gun, as though he has any chance of hurting it. Still, his example is enough for some of the others who bring their weapons to bear, adding more las bolts and bullets. Shrugging off the welter of fire, the Titanic Warpborn heaves its bulk against the second tower, slamming its impossible obesity into the structure. Sprays of ichor and boil pus explode outwards from ruptured flesh, but the fortification buckles, a huge crack breaking along its flank, as though caught in the throes of an earthquake. Like a grotesque bear hugging its prey, the Warpborn embraces the breaking tower, using its weight to haul it down to the ground amid a plume of dust and filth. Flies swarm in spirals around the debris, dancing in celebration over the rubble. A handful of battle sisters emerge from the debris, bolters barking defiance until the sword sweeps down, hewing three of them into pieces. The other two sisters scramble over the settling masonry and twisted metal, their bolts covering the creature's grinning face in a barrage of small explosions. A natural flesh flies from every direction, thick blood oozing from the craters left by the impacts. The creature lifts its mace, the rusted half crushing the next fusillade. And then a fourth battle sister, into pulp and ceramite and pasted flesh. The last of the tower garrison runs out of ammunition, but stands defiant upon a heap of broken ferrocrete amid the bodies of her sisters, one hand lifting the pendant that hangs about her neck. It seems as though the Warpborn flinches for a few seconds, and an after-image of flames flits across my visions, though I saw nothing. The gate below us crashes open, and a pair of immolator tanks speed out, even as the demon giant smashes the battle sister from the rubble with a backswing of its mace, hurling her broken body 24 meters through the air. Blessed Prometheum scorches from the turrets of the armored vehicles, bathing the great Lord of Decay in waves of white-hot fury. Two squads of battle sisters advance beneath us, the flies parting from their path like water on a ship's bow. The silvery light I thought I saw in the wastes again swelling around the holy warriors. The thunder of their bolters sets the tempo for the hymnal, their voices raised in song to the external address systems as they advance in step, every round fired, finding its massive target. Swarmed in bolt impacts and sways of white flames, the Warpborn moans, its mouth spitting wide, as though as splitting wide as it swings the serrated edge of its sword at the closest immolator. The blade strikes the side of the vehicle to carve a furrow through the armor, an exhaust stack, billowing smoke from the engine mixing with the fly cloud that swirls around the immaterial behemoth. The stones around me ring to the sound of armored boots as more battle sisters pour up the steps to the rampart, presenting a wall of bolters, flamers, and melter weapons to the front of the abbey, their arrival forcing me and the others back from the wall. I can get only glimpses of what happens next, and hear the raging bellows of the monster as it slowly succumbs to the firepower and faith of the Adeptus Serratus. Everything falls still and silent for a few seconds, bringing with it a massive release of pressure. Praise the God Emperor! I shout, punching the air, while relief floods through me. I sag, almost falling to my knees, before I find the strength to stand again. My hand falls to my side, pistol still at my fingers. Praise the Emperor! The battle sister in front of me turns. Save your voice for prayers of strength, soldier of the Emperor, she says, and raises her head skywards. You will need all your faith against the coming enemy. With a cold shiver, I look up to follow her gaze. The sky above is smeared with high strips of cloud, and among the gloom I see sparks of movement. I think it must be aircraft at first, but the angle seems wrong, and I realize it's because the objects are coming straight down, directly toward us. Drop pods, someone says on my left. Traitor Astartes, says the colonel. Shut up, Henry. The red and green one's pretty cool. It has, I was gonna say it has a lot of personality, but all of the greater demons have a lot of personality. The one, the one from the one from Total War, it almost looks too much like it. Its affinity with the Nurglings is just too great. It's too into the Nurglings. It's too, yeah. And I know why that is. It's because the Nurglings and the Great Unclean One both look like Nurgle. The Plague Bearers do not look like Nurgle. The Plague Bearers look like people because the Plague Bearers were all once people or an alien or something. They were all once like humanoid, and they were like born of the essence of that thing. So that's why it's not so much that the Great and Clean One and the Nurglings look the same. It's just the Plague Bears look so different, and most people probably associate the plague. I don't know. It would be easy to associate the plague bearers with representing Nurgle because sometimes you see more of them. Yeah, the Great Unclean one has a lot of character. Um, it's well, I don't know actually. I was gonna say it's kind of hard with Chaos Undivided to give every aspect of Chaos truly its own flair. Yeah, I guess that's something that I'm really coming to grips with here. Is this like second incursion of Armageddon? It should be mostly done, I think, by Angron's forces. It should be Angron coming back. Um, that's what it should be, not just chaos. I'm not. I mean, I feel like a lot of times the gods want to work alone, and I can imagine why that. I can imagine why they would want that. At this point, I guess I wouldn't even say the forces of chaos are working together. It's simply that the fabric of reality is so thin in Armageddon at this point that they're just spilling through as a consequence of that. But it's I'm not really too sure how much I follow the whole there's a lot of violence here, so there's going to be a lot of demons here. I'm not sure how well I follow that, because if that were the case, that you would just have, I mean, there are like outbreaks across the galaxy, right? And that's bad, but I mean, almost every battle would just be an offering to them. I think the distinction here is it has to be done in the name of Khorne. I really do think that somehow Khorne has to claim the carnage, or it has to be done in his name, or something has to happen. He can't just lay claim to all carnage. Yeah, but I would say that all carnage in some small way does benefit Khorne, just not directly. Not all. Not it's a lot of it's indirectly. Also though, yeah, this is kind of interesting to see chaos existing in a vacuum, because usually the corruption is usually there's populations for them to corrupt. I thought they'd be here quicker. You hear stories about Space Marine drop assaults and imagine it's over in seconds. Armageddon has seen a few over the years, and this one seems pretty tame in comparison to the tales of Commander Dante dropping directly into the Beast's main camp in the First War. Just three bright lights, getting a bit bigger and a lot brighter every minute. I wish it was over quicker. I'm getting an ache in my neck from looking up, but it's the rapid beating of my heart that takes the real toll. It feels like I've been fighting for weeks, not hours. And then I think about what's happened and realize I've not slept in 2 days. And of the past 48 hours, there's only one in the camp with Orsk's people during which I wasn't battling or running for my life. Icar 4 was intense once it got going. Court Norm was pretty much 24 hours of tension and fear. All that seems like nothing compared to what we've been through. I suppose it's because I can't see the end. Those other times there was a mission. Now the mission is to survive until what? There's always going to be something else. Something else trying to kill me, I mutter, still unable to take my eyes off the trio of descending fireballs. Unease prickles through me, And for a moment, I think it's the Neverborn returning, but it feels more like a chill than a heat. And finally, I drop my eyes from the approaching drop pods to find Oheb's next to me. My skin feels like it's trying to peel itself off my flesh to get further away, and I can't stand to look at him for more than half a second. I've done well to avoid close proximity to him for most of the time we've been back together, but there's not really anywhere else to go on this packed rampart. What do you want? I ask him. I want to know how you keep going, knowing all the bad things you've done. He says with a belligerent stare. I want to know what it's like to have killed the people you've killed, endangered a whole planet, and then walk away from it, pretending the Emperor thinks that you're special. I'm not pretending anything, I tell him. There's nothing special about you, Cage, he continues, spittle flying from his lips. As if it doesn't matter whether I care what he has to say. He's going to say it anyways. I know what special feels like. Special is being so different, nobody can stand to be in the same room as you for more than a few seconds. Special is your parents leaving you at the local shrine because you disgusted them so much. Special is being raised to think that you're an aberration in the eyes of the God Emperor, to strive your whole life to atone to him for the sin of being born the way I was. Frag you, I snarl. You're a soulless mutant freak. You shouldn't exist. But they found a use for you. You should be grateful nobody put your head in with a brick when you were a baby. You don't get to judge me just because your life was shit. He points up into the sky. You're going to die sometime, Cage. Your luck, that good fortune that seems to keep you from biting that bullet each time, is going to run out. Maybe today. And you're bound for the abyss. I can tell you. Call yourself the Emperor's chosen all you want. You aren't going to the Golden Light, Cage. You're tainted. I could smell it on you. Maybe that abyssal passenger isn't around anymore, but it picked you for a reason. Maybe you invited it. His voice raised. Maybe those things are following you, trying to get you back. We'd be better off if you led them somewhere else. A few of the hivers look at us, and one of the battle sisters turns her head, attention drawn by the disturbance. I grab Oheb by the front of his scavenged coat and push through the revulsion to drag him closer. I feel repelled by his presence, not sickened like the Plagueborn, but physically repulsed. If it's an effort to stay close to him. That sounded like a threat, I snarl. He smacks my arm away with a growl. I know my purpose, he tells me, stepping back. I've come to terms with the misery of my life, because I know the good I've done, the tainted traitors I've helped expose. Anywhere else, anytime, you'd have a bullet in the back of your head and an Inquisition brand on your cheek. I turn away and catch the gaze of the colonel, who's been watching the argument from a few meters away, arms crossed. Keep your freak away from me, I snap at him and push past. I find a place alongside the wasters, who've been corralled at one end of the wall by a squad of battle sisters. Their chatter stops as I approach, and I wonder what they're talking about. Problems? Says Orskia. I shake my head. Nothing new, I tell her. I glance around the group. What are you talking about? Stories, she says with a shrug. Old stories. Almost forgotten. What sort of stories? I look up. The drop pods are like three new suns, the glow of entry panels yellow against the blighted red sky. Happy tales to distract us from impending death, I hope. There was a time when the Demius came to Armageddon before, generations ago. Demons. I keep my voice quiet, keenly aware of the battle sisters all around us. It's obvious the Warpborn are here. We just fought them. But it's strange how nobody ever talks about them directly, not even now. Everybody accepts that it's not something to discuss openly, and it's a sin to spread such gossip. What stories? Time of blood. My ancestors flee into deep wastes. Hivers fight themselves. Soldiers arrive and fight hivers. A rebellion? Yes, a rebellion. And Demeas came, called by evil hivers. She gestures upwards. And falling suns, hundreds of them. Space Marines came to Armageddon before to fight demons? I whispered, leaning I whispered, leaning closer. Don't you mean the first invasion of the beast? No, she snaps. No orcs. And not orcs. Other stories. You listen better. Big armies of space marines fighting with Demias. I never heard of any war here against Warpborn. I would have, I'm sure. An army of space marines is something people don't just forget, or a battle against the walking nightmares. Not against, she says, banging her fists together. She locks her fingers with each other. Fighting with. I look up again. Space Marines on the same side as the Warpborn. And a war that took place years ago that nobody has ever heard of. Sounds like the campfire entertainment to me. And I guess Orska sees something in my face that gives me away. They kill everyone, she says. All not space marines. Emperor's guardians kill them. Bring new hivers. Millions. The Emperor's guardians killed everyone? I'm really not following her now. Why would they do that? Who would be allowed to do that? She shrugs, a haunted look in her eyes. Everyone gone. She makes a chopping motion with her hand. Only wasters to remember. Who would have the authority to replace an entire planetary population, or have the resources to do it? It's insane. Moving hundreds of millions of people across the warp. It'd take a generation just to get them here. And for what? A further question answers my own question. The Inquisition. I barely breathe the word. Like talking about the abyssal ones. Only mentioning the shadowy left hand of the Emperor feels like it'll bring them down on top of us. Wiped everyone out for seeing demons. She nods and gives me a knowing look. Even if we live, we die, I think, Orskia says, casting glances at the Battle Sisters. Maybe not the first time. Maybe not the last time. All I need to brighten my mood is the thought that even if we somehow survive the Plague Bearers and Blood Warriors and Emperor knows what else, that the agents of the Inquisition are going to slaughter all of us for seeing something we're not supposed to. I add that to the list of other shitty fates awaiting me, and at least it's near the bottom in terms of likelihood. There's a far more chance. There's far more chance I'm going to get killed by the superhuman, power armored madmen in those falling drop pods, or succumb to their abyssal allies long before an Inquisitor decides I'm surplus to reinforcements. Well, that was the whole. If you were going to buy the book, that's the whole reason to read it right there. That little reveal. It's basically your post credit scene, I guess, before the credits. Yeah, the Inquisition would and could do that. They could just liquidate the whole planetary population. It would be quite an undertaking. I guess the only thing I'm just surprised about is that they somehow couldn't get all the wasters, but then again, they probably got a lot of them.